Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MF Uncensored. Don't forget, if you guys are listening to us on the go, you can find us on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically anywhere you get your podcast. You can also find more of our content on our website, themisfitfaction.com. There you find links to not only this show, but some of our other shows like the Multiverse Fancast and Cinematic Adventures. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Paul, and with me is a gentleman who I am super excited to talk with. Just doing the pre-show, we had a really good conversation about some of the topics that we want to bring up today. He's an author, business owner, and survivor of an incredible tragedy, and that's Mr. Andy Turner. Andy, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on.
It is truly my pleasure. It's so funny nowadays. Like, you never know who you're going to connect with, especially on social media. And I'm really excited for you to get a chance to tell your story and tell your triumph at the end of it during our stories or during our interview today. So, really quick before we get started, can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Georgia. I would view myself just as a country boy. Since Cedartown's been home for me, I was raised extremely strict by a Southern Baptist pastor. If you ever watched Footloose, that was my life. I
Oh,
wasn't allowed to. I was not allowed to go to a prom because a dancing foot and a praying knee doesn't grow on the same leg. And then I got to college because I got a football scholarship, and I walked on onto the field the first day of practice at NC State. I joined a fraternity, and I didn't come home for the holidays because I found a whole new world, and I realized that I kind of liked that culture a little better because I was a little
just a
more
little bit.
free. Yeah,
So, it's funny because I didn't go to I went to college, but I commuted. And I
yeah,
remember I spent like one weekend at my college and I was like, this is a totally different experience. Like,
yes.
I wasn't born or I wasn't raised very religious. Like, we practice religion, but I can't imagine in like Southern religion. Like, you hear stories, but
Oh yeah, it was. Well, it put a good base in me that I still live by today. But I was raised extremely legalistic, and so I had to learn a lot as I become an adult. That the world really does not work that way. And I had some good classes and like in debate in college to where they would ask, what do you believe? Which side are you on? Like on the hard topics,
yeah.
pro-choice, pro-life, but whatever you believed, you had to argue the other side against what your core beliefs were, and that taught me a lot of things to learn to look at things from a different perspective, and you may not always be right.
You see, I like that because we've talked a lot of different episodes about how, especially modern times, it's very you're either right or you're completely wrong. Like, nobody can have conversations anymore. Like,
All
there are
right.
plenty of things. I'm not a religious person, but I can have conversations about religion and not disparage somebody for what they believe in. But
Right.
like nowadays, especially if you don't agree with someone, especially, and we're going to talk about social media because that's a big topic for you. But if you put something on social media without any context, without any and you think all these people are your friends and people that suddenly you're getting viciously attacked and it's
Oh,
wild.
absolutely.
Like, nowadays you can't say anything. Like, I went through my Twitter when I reactivated it and I deleted and most of them were stupid. Like, hey, going out drinking tonight. I was like, well, I don't want anybody to see that I like alcohols. Like, nowadays you got to be super careful and super cognizant and it's wild.
Oh, absolutely. And what you're touching on, the viciousness of people, I would have never imagined if we wouldn't have went through this, how bad that people can be, and what they'll believe. You can put the most outlandish things on social media, and they will believe it. I mean, it's no matter how crazy it is, they'll believe it.
There's that commercial with like the lady who's going on a date with the guy she met from the internet, and she's like, he's a French model. And it's like some schlubby looking guy, and he's like, oh, bonjour. Like, she
Yeah,
totally
yeah.
believed it. He was like, it is crazy. The internet's been a great place for a lot of different things. Like, I love podcasting, and obviously that's why I'm here. And the internet made it super easy, especially with Zoom and social media, like to connect with people who you wouldn't normally connect with. This show actually wasn't even an interview show when we first started it. It was a topical show, and then it just kind of evolved into more interview-based styles. So while there's plenty of good with the internet and social media, there is so much not good, is the way I like to say it.
All
But
right.
so you were raised in a very religious household. You went to college. Now you were mentioning in the pre-show, you started your first business at 19.
I did, and I'll tell you the drive that started behind that is And growing up, we are very poor. My father would pastor churches, and he'd make like $19,000 a year. And there were many times that we didn't have meals, or my mom learned to make beans at the last 5 and 6 days. You put on the stove, and it was bean soup, beans with cornbread, beans with onions. And I didn't really know that I was poor until I went to school.
Right.
And then the other kids told me how poor I was because my clothes didn't fit, and they had holes in it. There were hand-me-downs that I'd received, and I was picked on relentlessly.
Hmm.
And then as a little kid, I didn't have a lot of close friends. I was picked on just so bad. And I mean, I'd come home crying because everybody was so mean to me because the way I dressed. And I just didn't have the things, or I couldn't participate in the Halloween things at school because I didn't have a costume. And I even had teachers that made fun of me.
Hmm.
And so I remember thinking, if I ever change, or when I become an adult, I want to change this for my life. If I have kids, they're never going to feel this way.
Hmm.
And one of the catalysts that kind of was a turning point for me is a kid at school gave me a little magazine with cars. I always loved cars. And I came home and I started tearing the pages out of these cars that I was just in love with. And I was taping them on the wall. And my dad came in and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm hanging these cars up and I'm going to own them one day." And he laughed at me. And he said, "Well, nobody ever has more than one car." And he said, "You're definitely not going to own all of those, especially at the prices." And I remember inside, remember how I was raised. Inside, I was saying the most god awful cuss words. I was cussing him out. I was afraid to do it out loud
Oh yeah.
because my dad didn't believe in timeout. He believed in knockout, blackout, kick out. So I wasn't going to say it out loud, but I was saying it in my head. And when he walked out, I said, "One day I'm going to own every fucking one of these things." And so at about 16, I met a man who kind of took me under his wing and started teaching me business because my parents didn't know. I mean, all they knew was just religion life.
Hmm.
And when I turned 19, he helped me start a business as I'm going into my freshman year of college. And my sophomore year of college, that business I started was generating $3 million a year.
That's awesome.
And I have owned every one of those cars, and I still have some of them today. And I still have the that magazine papers that I tore out and I hung on my wall. I've got them all. I checked them off. But I had to have that drive. If I
Right.
wouldn't have been picked on and felt like the misfit and ostracized as a child, not having friends and left out, and then the people that I felt like should have inspired me laughed at me, it wouldn't have put that drive in there to where nothing was going to stop me from achieving my goal.
Hmm. Oh, that's awesome, man. I got like chills listening to that. That's such an empowering story. As a kid, I also got bullied. And for me, it was more like the things that I was interested in. Like you and I have a common connection where we're big Superman fans, which like
Absolutely.
that's how our conversation started for the pre-show, which is the best thing ever. Because if you guys are watching the YouTube video, I have my nice Superman posters. I have signed autographs from different Superman actors. So like I'm a big Superman fan. And when I was little, if you were like when I was a kid, growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, if you wore a superhero shirt at school, oh my God, you got relentlessly made fun of. Like
Yeah.
you were called a nerd or a geek, misfit, whatever it was. And nowadays, the superhero industry is worth billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, behind the scenes. And it just goes to show that like the world is shifting in a way that the people that are passionate are the ones that are able to turn that passion and that drive into something super productive. I didn't think I would be hosting a podcast where I was talking to people all over the world. Like when I first said I was going to make a podcast like 8, 9 years ago, people were like, "What's a podcast? Like, what are you talking about?" I was like, it's like an internet radio show." They're like, "Yeah, good luck with that, chief." Now, like I'm sitting here, my wife has her book page. I'm wearing our merch. Like it's awesome. And finding that drive and that passion is the most important thing for doing anything creative. If,
That's it.
my very humble opinion. But for you, you start the successful business at 19. Where did you go from there?
Once that business got started, I realized I had a knack for business, and I kept that company up until 6 years ago when my wife passed away,
Mhm.
and then I liquidated it. But I had it from 19 till 45
Oh,
or
wow.
44, and it was an extremely successful business. But In my junior year, I invested in a ready mix company here in Georgia, in the Atlanta area. One plant, two trucks. When I sold out my shares in 2008, we had 450 trucks and 13 plants.
Wow.
And it was an extremely successful venture. I've been part of starting 9 companies and flipping them. I enjoy that, and I've been hired as to go into other companies to run it at a VP president level and be consultants, Fortune 500 companies, and that's what I love doing. And now I've got 2 companies that I'm enjoying, and I hope to turn these over to the family and sit in a rocking chair and do a lot of traveling and golfing soon.
Oh, that's the goal, man. Like, for me, I'm lucky that I have a job where I actually retire very early, and then I'll find like my passion project to work on. So I can't imagine being so close to the goal. Like, for me, my dad is the hardest working guy that I know. My dad has worked ever since he was like 6 years old. He's been working, he's been hustling, he's been working because in his world, he wants his children, same as you. He doesn't
Yeah,
want his children to ever want and to like always he shows love and just how passionate he is by giving. And it's it's such a great ability to have to just be able to provide in any capacity, not just financially, but also love, compassion, all that stuff, like giving that out to people. I feel fulfilled whenever I'm able to help somebody, even just a little bit. So it sounds like you're doing a lot for a lot of people.
yeah, we share a lot in common, and man, kudos to your dad. We need more dads like that, man. That don't just tell you got to work hard, but he's also an example of it. So, man, I love the story.
Yeah, my dad is so passionate about work that he had to retire. They literally were like, "You are hitting the maximum age." He's like, "Am I though?" And he's still, as soon as he retired, he was retired for like less than a month, and he's like, "Oh, I also started 2 new jobs." I was like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm doing consulting and I'm doing this," and I'm like, "I don't."
Good
You're
for
supposed
him,
to.
man.
Yeah, like they went traveling for about a month. They went all over Europe, my dad and my stepmom, as a celebration. And then yeah, they my dad's working again. Like it is wild the kind of drive. And for me, like it inspires me, especially now as an adult, I get it. Like as a
Right,
kid, it always upset me because I was like, well, you don't have time for me. You don't like you're
right.
always working, you're always busy. As an adult, and seeing, like, even myself this past week, I put in like 30 extra hours at work just
Mhm.
because A, it's the holiday season at time of recording, and also B, like that's how I provide. So like as an adult, as a married adult, I get it. And the perspective just shifts and it's wild. Like I didn't expect it was gonna happen.
Yeah, I love it though, because if you wouldn't have had that role model to see, you probably wouldn't have that same drive.
Yeah. So for you though, obviously there is another part of your story, and it's probably the part of the story that you presented to me over Facebook, and I remember
Yeah.
reading it, and just as much fun as I have like talking about like all the fun stuff and the cool stuff there, you obviously had something happen to you and something happened in your life that was a tragic turning point, and I would really, if you're comfortable, I would love for you to share it with some of our listeners.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we're here. Our life mission now is to help people based on the tragedies that we live through. But to keep it short, I'll give the Cliff Note version, and then everybody can connect and pick up the book and read the story. There's also a movie that we're signed that has bought the rights to the book that'll be filming in 2024. So it'll be seen on those fronts too. So you get a early preview of it. My daughter and I, who's actually sitting beside me right now, we had one night of having a great dinner with my wife, and we go to bed, and we're awakened early the next morning by a noise. And when you wake up from a dead sleep, you're not really sure what's
What's
going
going
on.
on? Yeah.
Everything's cloudy. I wasn't sure if she had failed. She was in the bathroom. I go running, and it woke my daughter up. We meet at the door. I open the door, and when I look over the top, I realized that my wife had committed suicide. And when I see that, and my daughter's, she was blocked by a cabinet that was there. She couldn't see the mass of it, but she saw her mother's legs. I grabbed my daughter, I pulled back in the floor, and I'm just screaming, God, no, no, not no, not this. And I take her to the couch, I call 911. the police come, and I'm actually living the most god awful nightmare of any horror movie or anything that I could imagine, is seeing somebody that you love as your best friend in this condition and having no idea why. She's the happiest person I know. We had a tremendous marriage, never fought, never had disagreements. I would have told you we were the postcard family. And after the fact, I find out that she'd been living double lives. And some of the boyfriends that she had in her family take to social media. We wake up right after the funeral, and I look at my daughter now. Then we've got murderer painted on the front of our house. Our cars have been vandalized. People go to social media saying god awful things about me, about my children. You talking about feeling like a misfit when the whole world turns against you,
Mm-hmm.
all because of uh, social media. And we were bullied so bad, people were calling my job saying, "Hey, you got a guy there that killed his wife." When the police left at 9:30 that morning, everything was closed. It was open and done. I was never named a suspect, nothing. But social media has driven this to make me look like I was a god awful person, and everybody bought on. And I had to take my kids out of school. I had to hire security for my children. We've had people show up in our front yard and want to fight and vandalize our property. I think we're at 51 tires cut and nails and screws in it. The police would call me and be like, "Hey, man, look, we want to tell you got another death threat."
Mm-hmm.
And it got to a part for us that it was so awful. I pulled my kids into private school. Everywhere we went, we had security. Everybody I dated was harassed. Or if me and you went to dinner,
Mm-hmm.
just you and I, you're just going to be a buddy and be like, "Man, I'm sorry what you're going through." They would send defects to your house saying that you endangered your children and having them around a murder. So everything that I've done just seemed like, it was falling apart because of the attacks, and we couldn't hide from the social media.
Right.
I had to file a bankruptcy because they were affecting my work. And then I'm sitting at a part to where I'm not sure exactly how I'm even going to take care of my kids. And we've got people coming up to us in public saying awful things to my entire family. And when I'm like, "Man, I don't understand this." We're trying to mourn. We're trying to just survive. And it seemed like everybody was against us. I was on an island, just trying to be dad.
Yeah.
And life really did. And it took a long time to be able to turn around. We're taking people to court, suing them for slander and defamation.
Yeah.
We would win hands down because they absolutely had nothing they based it on other than they read it on social media.
Mm-hmm.
They bankrupt that. So now I'm out more money that I already didn't have at the time because they're sinking me because I wasn't allowed to work because the way they would do it. So I had to get to a point to where, like I did as a child, I had to purpose myself through it.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to let this beat me. And I pulled the family together, and I'm like, this really sucks. It's not fair, but we can't quit.
Right.
We can't sit here and pout and cry. We've done that.
Mm-hmm.
We've done that many days and many nights. And there's so many stories that there's no way we could cover it in this time frame. There's just so many stories that's just heartbreaking because in our book, I'm not the only author. My entire family authored this.
Oh,
So
wow.
you're hearing it from their perspectives, their mouths on what they endured, as well as mine. But for me, when you read it and you hear everybody else's tale, it's gut wrenching. So I said, we've got to do something. I've learned that sitting and crying in a mud puddle is never going to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting here and getting hit in the jaw and letting everybody say things about it's not going to work. Let's write a book. And we started fighting back. And now we've got a much bigger platform than them. We've got a movie that's about to be made about our family. Then we're speaking everywhere, helping the proceeds from our books going to suicide prevention. We're going to so many places and seeing people help and lives saved and people encouraged to not bully people, to not go say shit on somebody that's not true because you're hurting lives, you're
Mm-hmm.
affecting children. Then it's to me one of the worst things that you could do.
Yeah.
You know, and especially to attack somebody in their lowest point.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
like at the or after a funeral, like you're dealing with this terrible family tragedy. You need your own time to mourn, and you as a parent, I'm sure needed time to help your kids get through this because I'm sure they didn't understand. Do you mind if I ask how old they were about when this happened?
my daughter was, so right now they're 21, 18, 16, and 14, and this was 6 years ago,
Oh,
6.5 years ago.
so like just that alone, that's a terrifying and confusing time to begin with. As a teenager, as a young child, you're learning about the world, you're learning about what you believe, what you're forming your own identity, and to have a tragedy like that, I can't even imagine. But I really enjoyed the part that you told me where like all these proceeds, everything you're doing is to help other people. And
Right,
it's a conversation that doesn't happen enough where, especially young men, they don't ever want to talk about when they're dealing with psychological or mental issues, and
right.
then women are like, they can hide it. They can hide it so exceptionally well. And I feel like us as a society, we normalize the struggle more than the actual problem. Like it's easy for me to be like, well, I'm just having a tough week. And then next week, oh, I'm just still having a tough week. And how many tough weeks do I want in my life where that just becomes normal? So
Right.
like I think having the conversation is super important, and then hearing your story is even more important because it lends to the like I could talk all I want, but if I'm not pouring my personal experience or passion or knowledge into something, it's just words.
Yeah. Demographics changed. I was shocked as I started getting into studies and talking to people and going and when we talk, we're not just talking to patients, we're talking to the doctors and the staff that are treating patients also, and their families who want to give up on them because a lot of them are addicted. And they've been stealing from them, or whatever. So the families are wanting to give up. So we're talking to the families as well. But what I've learned is the demographic has changed.
Mhm.
Used to the military was tops, and then you'd have police, law enforcement, EMS, and the shift now since COVID is men with families.
Mhm.
It's us that
That's
that has rose to the top for suicide. And I get it because I would be lying to everybody if I told you I didn't sit and think about it during some of those dark days.
Mhm.
But if I didn't have my family that I'd sat and looked at and had such a love for them, and like, what would they do? What would I be doing to them? Then, man, I might would have been there myself because when you got the world coming against you, it enters your mind,
Oh yeah.
and you can't help what enters your mind, but you can help what stays there.
Yeah. And how you react to it too.
That's
Like,
it.
a lot of people when that becomes their option, it's because they feel like they don't have any other options. Where it's like, my life is just this, and it's only going to get worse. This is my best way out. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. I've talked to a lot of people, and I have a very strong interest in mental health, and I'm a very big advocate for it, especially like I said for men my age, and how you mentioned, like this is now it's climbing and it's getting to this point. I always say there's two reasons why people feel that that's their choice. One is just a pure mental defect, something that you can't quantify, just something going on in the brain, chemical that you can't control. You can medicate, you can see therapy, but eventually it's just going to get to a point where it's just uncontrollable. Or you get pushed to a point. And a lot of people felt that, especially with social media. Like, I remember the first negative comment I got on any of my social media with podcasting. And I remember, like, I took it super personally. Like, that guy came up, kicked my dog, and then said that comment to me and then left. Like, that's how I felt. And I was like, that's his reaction. What's my reaction? I get to choose that. Like, just because he didn't like my podcast doesn't mean I'm doing a bad job or anything like that. So that's the problem with social media. Like, everybody has a voice, which is great for me, the podcaster talking, but then they have a voice coming back, and it's my decision how to react to it. And I like how your reaction to all this has been to do something super super helpful to the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to help people, and you're talking about how you react. Sometimes it's hard to set back and let people just bash you,
Yeah.
especially when it's affecting your lives. Then I do want to point this out because it's something that my daughter brought out. And when we go and we speak, she's got a powerful message. a lot of people that'll consider suicide and mental health, when they get to the point, they'll say that people are better off without them.
Mhm.
Yeah, because they think, because where I am, what I've done, or what I contribute to life, people are better off without me.
Right.
Well, if you look at it from her perspective, if that's what her mom was thinking, which we have no idea, but I hear a lot of people say that when we travel. Were we better off without her? Was she better off not having a mom? And look what we went through
Mhm.
because of that decision. No, nobody in the world is better off without you.
Yeah.
You know, we're all fearfully, wonderfully made. We all have a purpose. And with that being said, people are better off with you in their life. And if you need help, they will help you get it. Go
Mhm.
get the help that you need. But don't think that leaving makes people better, because it doesn't. Because they're going to hurt, and there's an aftermath of your loss. So know that you are important. Everybody is important, and you're important to somebody, whether you feel like you are or not.
1,000%. And unfortunately, like especially in our country, I'm in New York, just for point of context. Mental health services and mental health care is a nightmare. Like it is as you walk around New York City and like it's the Wild
Yeah.
West at this point, especially after COVID. Like when COVID rolled around and then they did all these different laws and bail reform and stuff like that in New York, it's just everything just shifted very hard to more lawlessness and more just people trying to get by. I find that our mental health, especially in New York, is exceptionally reactionary. This happened, so now this has to happen, right? You can't get help until you get to this. Imagine how many people got the best mental health services the second they were like, I think I might need help. I think there's something wrong. Instead of getting to the point where, like in our state, you can actually be forcibly detained for a mental health crisis. Like if you say
Oh, oh,
I'm gonna hurt someone or I'm gonna hurt myself or I'm gonna do something terrible, like you can get forced to the hospital for an evaluation. Sometimes it's super helpful for people at that point. But the question is, how do they get to that point? And what kind of things can we do beforehand to help them? And I think what you're doing and what your family's doing, going around and talking to people and sharing your story, I think that's one of the best things that could be done for somebody who's maybe not in crisis yet, but is feeling like, hey, like some of this really speaks to me and it resonates. So, like, what you're doing is just awesome. Nope. Oh, there you
I'm
are.
sorry. There was a call that come in and it kicked my phone. I apologize. Normally it
No
doesn't happen.
worries. That's why we edit. It's fine.
Yeah, you just said resignates right there. So man, I am so sorry.
Which is funny because it's like it really resonates. And then click. I was like, oh, it didn't resonate.
I
No,
am sorry.
all good. Again, this is why we edit. So I'm just gonna start talking again. So it's all good.
Yeah,
But I really do think that your purpose here is just so impactful. And man, like you and your family, you guys are doing like I said, I'm not a religious person, but I like to call it God's work. You're doing the universe's work. Like you said that everybody's here for a purpose. And even though I don't particularly subscribe to religion, I fully believe that everybody in this universe is here to do something.
yeah,
And it's your choice whether or not you want to do it or not. So I like the free will and purpose balance.
right.
That's my cup of tea because I like to feel in control, but I also like to feel like I'm really here to do something and I'm still trying to find it and it's exciting to me. So for you guys, it sounds like you're really doing some very important work.
Well, we're definitely trying, and if we just save one life or help, the amount of feedback that we've received already has been overwhelming.
So
Uh,
yeah, speaking of which, like, do you have like a really strong success story? Like just not like something that changed the world, but just like a moment where everything was like, man, this is why I do this.
yeah, there was a man. We were at a car show, and a man, trying not to get emotional. A man came up. He had read the book, and he had a 15-year-old son who had been trying, made attempts to commit suicide, was cutting himself. He's bullied at school, bullied on social media, and the little boy's name was Jackson. And he said, sir, can I get one of your books? So we're at a car show. I said, I've got some. He said, this is my son Jackson. Will you please just talk to him? He said, I read your book, but I want him to read it. And I just started talking to the young man. And I said, tell me what's going on. He said, um, I just want to die. He said, I have no purpose in life. He said, I don't have any friends. He said, I don't play sports. I'm not athletic. He said, girls don't want to date me. And then he was just going through all these things on why his life was just so bad. And I sat there and I just listened to him. And you could just see the pain and the hurt in his eyes and his heart. And when you see a kid that way, I mean, he was a handsome little fella, and but he was hurting and he just wanted to give up. And I said, Jackson, I said, tell me, what do you enjoy doing? And he's like, well, I'm pretty good at video games. And he said, he said, I like the Marvel movies. I'm like, doggone, I do too. And I said, I suck at video games. My kids beat me all the time. I said, you know how many careers there are in video games and create them? I said, what if you created the next Fortnite, or you created the next Call of Duty? He goes, man, that'd be awesome. I said, what would stop you from doing that? I said, if you weren't here, maybe. But what if the guy that created the games that you love playing went through what you did and decided that he don't want to be here? I said, make me a promise. I said, read the book. And then when you finish, will you call me and let's talk about it and what you see in it? He called me the next morning. He read it overnight.
That's awesome.
One night. And he said, hey, he said, man, he said, I'm sorry you saw me in that shape. He said, I'm really inspired by your story, your children's story. And he said, I want to go to school and learn computer programming. He said, I'm going to be the person that creates a new video game. I said, and you will be. And I said, if that's what you person, don't let anything stop you. Don't do it. And now he's on my social media. He writes me about 3 or 4 times a week. And he's got a little girlfriend, but all he needed was some confidence, somebody to invest in him. And that's one of my favorite, but there's been so many. And I believe that he probably will be the next creator.
Dude, that's awesome. That's like I hope that one day I have you back on the show and you tell me, "Hey, Jackson made a video game." And
Yeah.
just watching you how passionate you are about I don't even know this kid and I'm rooting for him now. Like this
Yeah.
is a kid that you met randomly and now I'm like, "Man, I hope he fucking does it." I hope
Yeah.
I sit down like my wife and I love to play PlayStation together and ironically she's usually much better than me, which is hilarious. If I could tell 15-year-old me what my life was in store, like, because I went through that too, like just feeling like there's something wrong with me, like I'm not good enough. I watch like my siblings who are all very, good at what they do, especially in high school. You think that somebody's good at something in high school, and it's literally like the most mundane thing. But
Right.
that's your world. Your world is so much smaller, especially in high school. I work with a lot of high schoolers, and they'll tell me their problems. And the thing that I had to learn immediately was just because I, as an adult, don't see that as a problem, that's their world.
Oh
That
yeah,
is
it's a big problem.
everything to them. And especially now with social media. I had a kid tell me, that they didn't get enough likes on their photo. It's like, how many likes did you get? They're like 200. I was like, I don't get 12. All right. Like, and I had to check myself and I was like, that's their world though. Like that's how they compare themselves to other people. And I always tell people, like, don't compare yourself to who you want to be
Right.
and fight for that person. Like if I told my 15-year-old self that I would have a beautiful nerdy gaming wife, I would have just been like, no, no, come on. Come on. You crazy. But like my wife and I, we play video games together. She loves Marvel movies too. Like I manifested it because I made that choice. I was like, I'd rather compare myself to who I want to be. And how
Right.
do I get to that person? And whether it was, getting great mentors, I've had a lot of great influences in my life, mentors, coaches. I always think that everybody should have a mentor in any
Yes.
capacity. Somebody who may not know everything better than them, but at least knows one thing. Like if
Yeah.
I can learn one thing, I'm almost 40 and I still love learning things. Like tell me things. I want to know. I don't know everything. I'll never know everything, but I love when people tell me things that I don't know. And that's part of
Oh
the reason
yeah.
that this show's so much fun for me to do. Like we have our comic book show, which I love talking about comic books. I can talk about comic books all day long. And that's how this whole started. And that's what I'm passionate about. And that's why it resonates with people. But like for this, like to talk to people about stories, because I gotta ask, your book is becoming a movie, which is the coolest thing for me. Like, because I'm a huge movie fan. Like, even during COVID, I was counting down to when we can go see a movie. And I remember
Yeah.
the first movie we went to go see during the pandemic when they finally opened up theaters was Wonder Woman 1984, the shittiest movie of the year, and I was so disappointed because I loved the first one. And I'm a bigger DC fan than Marvel fan. You know, don't come at me, people in the comments. But I remember just being so, and you couldn't eat. You had to wear masks. They like assigned the seats. Like I don't think my wife and I even sat next to each other. I think we were like 2 seats apart. And I remember just being so happy to be sitting in there like a kid in the candy shop, just because that was what I was passionate about. So for you, how did your book shift into being made into a movie?
Ironically, when the book come out, I called a friend of mine, and I've always had some connections into some celebrities. I had celebrity friends. We have some great endorsements on there from them, and I called one of them, and he said, "Hey, I stayed up all night reading your book. I hear that a lot. I couldn't put it down." And he said, I know some people. Do you mind if I share it?" And I get a call back, and it was purchased by a large movie conglomerate. And since then, and we've had another meeting, and there's a strong possibility it may go to a 12-part miniseries as well.
Oh wow.
So we can tell more of the story instead of trying to put it into two
One,
hours.
yeah. Oh wow. That's so cool. Like, and that's again, it also resonates with your message about getting this information out. And I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm excited. Like, I know because your book's going to be in my queue by the end of this episode. Like, by the time the day is over, you're going to see at least one order from me. Probably my wife too, which I don't get because we live in the same house. But she does what she wants with books. I just stay out of the way at this point. But like, we'll get a delivery. It's like thrift books, and she's like got 92 books in there. I'm like, all right, well, here we are. But
That's fantastic.
I will be the first one in the theater for that. That is the coolest thing. And just like I said, I always say that if you're doing something and it aligns with where you should be and what you're doing, things just manifest with it, right? Like I'm sure when you were writing this book, it wasn't, well, I hope I get a movie deal out of this.
No, we just wanted to one tell our story. To part of it's to set the record straight. I mean, it's a tell-all book, and the people that were being mean to us, we get to throw some punches back. So there was some of that. We want to kind of get that out. But on the most part, is that as we really started getting into the meat of it, is we we're not the only family that's going through this.
Right.
You know, suicide is sadly increasing across America.
Hmm.
And how does people deal with it? What are they doing? And so we wanted to be able to help people with not just our story, but to be able to overcome and to see a light at the end of the tunnel and have some encouragement, know that you're not alone, and to be loved.
Yeah.
I think that's really what we lack today that we used to have in the old days is people that would just love on you and be friendly and not be so self-absorbed.
And we were also raised in a certain generation where it was rub some dirt in it, get over it. You're
Yeah,
too, my favorite as a child, I was always told you're too sensitive.
yeah,
That was both my parents got divorced and somehow they still managed to connect on that one line where they both said it. They didn't agree on any much else, but they both said you're too sensitive. That was what I was told. I'm gonna make a t-shirt, I think, that says it at this point.
yeah.
But we are getting towards the end of our interview, unfortunately, but we do have our favorite Misfit faction game. If you're interested, we like to do a little rapid fire question asking. So I rattle off a question and you just first thing that comes to mind, if you're interested in playing, of course.
Oh, sure, I'll play.
Oh, this is my
Okay.
favorite because it's always entertaining. So, for you personally, in moments of difficulty, is there a mantra or a phrase that you find particularly comforting? Something that you say to yourself?
Yeah, don't give up, don't quit, and I'll repeat that to myself over and over.
How has your perspective on love and relationships evolved since you have been trying to get your message out and unfortunately since that tragedy?
I'm not a loner at all. I was extremely skeptical, but since then I've remarried. I found love and been able to experience it from a perspective where it's fulfilling now.
All right, let's see. If you could offer one piece of advice to individuals supporting someone going through grief, what would it be?
Be patient because they don't grieve like you do. They don't think that they need to, but be patient with their need and how they need to express themselves to get over the grief. Just support them and love them.
That's awesome. What is a self-care practice that you do for yourself?
I like to get by myself and meditate. I like, to be alone, go through my thoughts. I do read a lot, but it's very important to me to be able to sit quietly and just kind of process things.
And then the last one, what is a book or movie besides your own that resonates with you on resilience and overcoming adversity?
Rudy.
Oh yeah, Rudy. Oh God, I haven't seen
Yes.
it in years. Oh, that's a fun callback. I like that. I haven't. Yeah, I gotta sit down and watch Rudy of all things. But
Yeah.
oh, that's awesome.
Rudy's one of, man, I'll cry, but I grew up playing football. I played
Mhm.
18 years. So when they pick him up, carry him off the field, I'll cry my eyes out. And
Oh yeah.
I got to meet the guy at one of the cons that played Rudy. Then I told him that. I was like, man, your movie's the only movie that makes me cry. He said, you know how many grown men that I hear say that? And then I met the real Rudy Rudiger at a speaking conference. He does motivational speaking. And I got him to sign me a Notre Dame jersey. So
Oh, that's
I like.
awesome. What a cool story. Now, for our listeners, if they want some more of your material, if they want to order your book, if they want to find you on social media, like what are the places that they can go to?
Yeah, the name of the book is "Who Turned Up the Silence," and it's got its own website, whoturnedupthesilence.com. You can find the book anywhere, Amazon, Walmart.com, Books a Million, Barnes and Nobles. But if you'll reach out to me personally on social media, uh, my family and I will sign the book. Everybody has their own quotes and things they put in, and we'll overnight it to you.
That's awesome. Social media, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I'll send you all the links so you can share it with them.
Perfect, including myself because I'm selfish and I want more of this kind of content. So it's really for me. It's not for the listeners. They're good. But that is going to take us to the end of our time. Andy, thank you so much for jumping in. This was fantastic.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on, especially since you're the Superman fan.
Perfect. That's the whole reason. But thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Take care.